we are talking Varanus, PRISCUS, as at least that's the English translation of this Chinese monster movie. Yes, it's Chinese monster movie time again. Now, this is quite an interesting and fun idea of a plot that actually reminds me a little bit of a Chinese version of Tropic Thunder in a lot of ways. So we have this film crew that are filming on this island somewhere that are actually making a monster movie within this monster movie. So we have this film crew there, and we've got the kind of, the director, the producer, etc., the stars. And one of the guy who's in charge of like the pyros and the explosions and things like that, he actually sets off a huge explosion, which is on this kind of like mountainside, which ultimately causes a landslide. And we learn that this mountain is somewhat hollow and contains this huge kind of giant monitor lizard, as well as other beasties which are now loose. They are chasing our film crew, devouring them as they go, and then we have divisions within this kind of like this group of people, and a sleazy kind of producer wants to try and take advantage of the situation. What'll happen? Well, you're going to have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss, first of all, what works in this movie. First of all, I think even though it ends up in the same way, people running away from monsters on a kind of island, how we get there is, I think, more of a fun setup compared to the normal, like, we're going on an expedition, which seems to be like the vast majority of these type of films. Having this kind of like crew of inexperienced, essentially, actors and film crew make this kind of monster movie is kind of like a fun concept, and as I say, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Tropic Thunder setup. So we have people who aren't, going specifically out for an expedition, aren't necessarily cut out of this kind of thing, having to kind of face this unexpected challenge of different type of creatures and stuff. And it lends itself to a fun concept with some kind of fun little winks about the kind of the film business, and we have some kind of quite kooky characters regardless of that as well. That I actually quite enjoyed. Another improvement here, I would say, is the CGI, at least with the kind of the main monster, which is this kind of huge monitor lizard. The CGI to me on that specifically actually kind of looks like it's actually a lot better than some of the other kind of the monster movies that we've seen. What else can I say that works? There's actually a couple of funny jokes in this movie. There's quite a fun one involving some bra pads, which I thought was, again, just a neat little joke here and there that I thought was quite fun. And we have our human bad guys, and yeah, they're a little bit over the top, which we'll come on to, but nonetheless, the guy that they've cast as this movie producer really looks good. He really acts like this kind of like oily, kind of snake-like guy. And then we have this other guy who ends up being his kind of his henchman, who is he's meant to be like the survival expert, the on-hand survival expert. There's actually quite a good fight scene with him and our main protagonist, where surprisingly it doesn't turn into a kung fu battle, and they actually use more kind of like military kind of style fighting, which I guess it's a little bit over the top. We see a few throws on wires and stuff, but nonetheless, I actually quite like the fight scene, and it seems, I thought, it's going to be a martial arts sort of scene in this movie, but it isn't. It's kind of like a nice down and dirty, dragged out fight. And it's relatively kind of fast paced, and we do have a variety of kind of different challenges that these characters go through. What doesn't work, ultimately, although it is a kind of improved version of many of these films we've seen, it still does follow the same basic premise as a lot of them. Ultimately, a group of people on a kind of a tropical setting running away from monsters. How he got there is a little different, but it ultimately ends up kind of being the same thing. And although I did like the CGI of the monitor lizards to a point, some of the other CGI here is actually quite awful, in particular these kind of flesh-eating bugs that they come across. The idea is pretty solid, but it really just looks like a kind of cartoon, especially in the kind of the intro sequence, which actually kind of sets up the movie, which takes place in a kind of, I think, probably like a World War II kind of era. But there are other instances as well where we have this kind of, the CGI isn't good. We were introduced to a secondary monster, which is this giant snake, which didn't seem necessary to me. It doesn't really have a hell of a lot to do with the plot. And when we get a kind of a smackdown fight between the lizard and the snake, but it really doesn't add anything to the plot, to be quite honest. Other than the CGI isn't as good on it. When it slithers around, it looks like it's kind of floating through air. But ultimately, it doesn't have a lot plot-wise. The movie wouldn't have been any different had you taken this kind of snake monster out of it. It just seemed unnecessary. I mean, yes, it's fun to have monsters fighting, but there was enough there anyway. It just didn't need it. And some of the other characters, as much as they're kind of fun, some of them, they're such broad stereotypes. Our protagonist is this, selfless guy that is completely kind of altruistic and, the complete 100% good guy. Our female lead is this actress who's, people just kind of dismiss her because she's an actress, but really she's kind of all this, deep down she's very courageous. And the bad guys, they're a little bit over the top, especially the producer. As kind of fun and oily as he might be, he goes a little bit OTT in the way that he turns into like a real cackling villain. I did like the kind of the hedge guy. He has a little bit of moral ambiguity at least, but overall the character work is somewhat broad. But nonetheless, it's still quite an enjoyable film, I would say. This is certainly, I think, a little bit more accessible than some of the other ones. It has a little bit more going for it. And although it's certainly not a brilliant movie in any stretch of the imagination, I'd actually say it's slightly above average, to be honest. So I will give this one a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.